Well, greetings, everybody. I've got, one might say, yet again, Nick Ward on my channel, but at the moment, there's very few experts to turn to who are experts in the European theatre, as it were, and Nick, of course, is one of them. And there's been a few things which might have escaped you, ladies and gentlemen, subscribers, because it hasn't got the kind of traction that Nick and I certainly thought it might get. And he's going to talk us through that because, as I always say with Nick, although I'm something of a strategist, he's actually in the shop and he's in the trenches. He's actually the one that has got his finger on the pulse, as it were. And so it's always good listening to him to see what he's got to say. But the thing I want to lead off with and invite Nick to talk about is, you might remember a year ago, there was lots of talk about Fort Knox in America. And President Trump was talking about checking it and opening up the gate and going in there and doing an audit, because, as you all know, it hasn't been audited for decades and decades and decades. I think it's in the 1950s. So it hasn't been audited. And of course, we now find out that things are beginning to sneak out a little bit about Fort Knox and what is actually in there, and more importantly, what isn't in there. But I'm going to leave that now to Nick to pick up and run with. And we'll see what he's got to say, because it's always interesting. So, Nick, over to you, dear boy.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Godfrey. If you looked at the headlines a year ago, there was huge talk from Trump and Elon about auditing Fort Knox and live streaming it to the public via Elon's Starlink satellite system. And then nothing. It dropped off a cliff. We got complete radio silence, as it were. And some people have been saying over the last year, look, that was all a PR stunt. But I really don't think it was, Godfrey. Trump mentioned multiple times on his campaign trail that he was going to do it, as well as in meetings with world leaders, that was his intention, including with France. But I'll come on to the significance of that in a minute. But if you look at all the dates, I think it was February the 26th, it was totally dropped, completely wiped from the internet. And look, Godfrey, knowing Trump, it would have been the perfect photo opportunity for him, wouldn't it? Of the century. He'd have absolutely loved something like that. So there's clearly a reason why this hasn't happened. You've got two of the most powerful and visible people in the world saying that they're going to open up the vault, and then the entire idea is ghosted overnight. And disappearing acts like this don't happen, Godfrey, unless someone clearly didn't want it to happen. So this is America's goal, the foundation of their financial security, and yet no one's allowed to see it. And the question is, why aren't the rightful owners allowed to verify it and see it? Why is that? It begs the question, doesn't it? So, look, you've even got senators, Godfrey, like Rand Paul. This isn't just an Elon Trump thing. You've got senators like Rand Paul asking for access as well, yet they just get stonewalled every single time. So is it even there, or has it been lent to somebody else? So a real financial audit means third-party verification. This is what's so important, which means validating, inspecting, and weighing the gold. Now, you're right, that hasn't been done in over 70 years. The Treasury says that, no, don't worry, it's fine. You just need to trust us that it's there. And if you look at actually what's supposed to be there, Godfrey, according to the US Treasury, the United States have got 8,133.5 metric tons of gold. Look, about half of that, so 56% of it, is stored in Fort Knox. And then the rest is spread between the Denver Mint and West Point. But if you want to have a look at the proportion of that, all of the gold mined in the world, so 2.5% of it is stored in Fort Knox. So it's a huge number. 2.15% of all the gold ever mined in the world is in Fort Knox. And what's worth noting as well is that actually in the 1940s, at its peak, that was closer to 20%. So it's come down massively, and that was predominantly in the 60s. And if you have a look at Fort Knox, look, it's not an ordinary building, Godfrey, as we know. It's a fortified vault surrounded by soldiers and barbed wire. It's basically a military base. There's no cameras, no visits, no one in, no one out. And for decades, of course, it's been that symbol of ultimate security, hasn't it? We've got that old adage, safer than Fort Knox. But even with all this security, there still hasn't been an audit since the 1950s. So 1953 was the last time that it happened under Eisenhower. And even then, Godfrey, only 5% of it was tested, which is worth bearing in mind. Now, moving forward to 1974 and 1984, they also had a few inspections that were done. They were mostly symbolic, Godfrey. They were press tours and photo opportunities by members of Congress. They relied heavily on kind of sealed compartments and spot checks. It wasn't a real audit at all by any stretch. And you come to actually look at the photos that were taken when they came to do that. They look ridiculous. It's nothing like the transparent storage that you see with other central banks. The pictures almost look like a veneer that's been stuck onto a wall with a room full of gold stacked to the rafters. It looks ridiculous. Nothing like the normal traditional way that gold is stored with other central banks. And also, when you look at the Federal Reserve's gold too, there's only one picture of that. And there's an open door with a facade of gold on the front. It looks like a Hollywood set, Godfrey. You can't even see inside the vault. And you compare that with the way that conventional bullion is stored, it's obviously completely different. So since 1985, we've not even had that. Just internal scheduled reviews, which is basically them checking the paperwork over. And if the gold really is there, Godfrey, what have they got to hide? Why so much secrecy around it? Why has it taken over 45 years now for us to even have a cursory look at what's in there? What are they afraid of? What do they think we'll discover? That's the question. And
Interesting, is it not, that I know you're coming on to it, but when people want their gold, nation states want their gold repatriated, part of which is in Fort Knox and indeed other places, whether it for what we call good delivery, and some of the stories coming out, and being sort of a bit of an ex-military man myself, military bases are funny things. Certain there'll be soldiers there, it's a military base and all the rest of it, but very, very few people will be anywhere near the vaults. There'll just be very, very few. Everybody else is marching up and down and having parades and looking good and all the rest of it, and saluting, sir, no, sir, yes, sir, no, sir, and all the bullshit that goes with that kind of thing. And so there'll be plenty of that, but nobody's actually going in there counting it or checking it. And whether it's official or not, one might understand it if it's like the crown jewels in London, which are all locked up, and you can see them and they're there, and okay, we've got the guards marching up, and whose keys, the Queen's keys, and all that kind of stuff. That's all fine, but there it is. You can actually clock the damn stuff through the glass. But if nobody's been in it and nobody's opened it, and I can't, something's definitely rotten in the state of bloody Denmark, isn't it? Something's not right. My little nose twitches, says something's not right, and especially as you so rightly pointed out. Trump missing a photo opportunity. I mean, that's like saying no to a pint. I mean, it just isn't going to happen.
Well, yeah, it's because they know that opening those doors would reveal something that they just don't want us to know. I think it would shake the foundations of financial confidence in the dollar, the treasury, and the entire monetary system at large, if you really want to be that dramatic. But the Treasury officials, they claim they audit it every year, but if you listen to economists like Jim Rickards, he says that, yes, the gold may be there physically speaking, but that's not the issue. It's whether that gold has already been promised to somebody else. Because you see, Godfrey, gold doesn't earn any interest, of course, so central banks and governments sometimes lease it out to make a return, and the gold stays in the vault. But its paper is leased to a third party. But the catch is, those third parties can then turn round and lease it to someone else, who in turn leases it to somebody else, and again and again and again. And that process is called rehypothecation. I suppose if you want to use an example, it's like buying a rare Van Gogh and then leaving it with a company that stores high-end art. But without telling you, that company has then made another 100 digital copies of the ownership certificate, and they sell those on too. Now, everyone then thinks that they own the original Van Gogh, And it all works just fine until someone shows up and tries to claim it to sell at an auction. It's exactly the same principle. That's how Fort Knox works. It may be there, most of it might be there, all of it might be there, but it's been promised to hundreds of different counterparties. And 1 metric ton of gold can support 100 tons of paper transactions, all linked back to that same gold in Fort Knox. So if someone were to go walk in and demand delivery of the gold, the entire financial system could collapse. The gold's not gone, Goddess. It's just been digitally spoken for multiple times over. And in a true crisis, if confidence in the paper market collapsed, there are estimates suggesting the price would surge straight to $10,000 an ounce. If there was a scramble for delivery, there are suggestions it might even go to $15,000 an ounce or even higher. And when you look at that system, it's no different from a bank run. When everyone starts withdrawing their deposits, it's exactly the same principle. And I know I touched upon this briefly when you introduced me, Godfrey, about France. But this is so relevant to what we've just seen. So the French, they're the fourth largest gold holder in the world. I think it's nearly 2,500 tons of it. Now, they've emptied all the gold they had stored over in the US. It was between July and January. The Bank of France sold off almost 130 tons that had been sitting in New York at the Federal Reserve since 1920. So instead of bringing it back home, they sold it in the US and repurchased new gold on the European market and stored it in Paris. Now, I'm not sure what Trump said in those meetings about auditing Fort Knox and America's gold supplies, but a year later, clearly Macron doesn't think it's safe over there. And the official explanation from the governor of the Bank of France was, look, this wasn't politically motivated. It was because the gold stored in New York was old and non-standard. And it was just easier to buy new bullion in Europe rather than refining and shipping that old stock. That was the mantra they came out with. But just think about that explanation for 1 second, Godfrey. It's trite. They're claiming that 129 tons of 999.99 pure bars, the large 12.5 kilogram ones that you see in all the films, those didn't meet current standards. I mean, I think the more logical explanation is that France requested its gold back from New York. The Americans had already sold it or couldn't deliver it, so the US just offered to send the money to France instead, and France accepted. So both countries agreed with the PR on the upgrading narrative. But I'm not buying it, Godfrey. Gold in 12.5 kilogram bars of that purity is the standard, and it always has been in that form. And as you well know, Godfrey, from your study of history, there have been multiple instances of gold repatriations to Europe in the past. We've got precedent for it, particularly from France, who were the ones that actually broke the gold standard in the first place with de Gaulle. Of course, in the 60s, he sent those battleships over to go and pick it up, which triggered the Nixon to bring us off the gold standard.
And Germany, of course, Germany took so much time. And of course, just for viewers who aren't particularly familiar with this aspect of gold, it is in no one's interest to open Pandora's box. That the gold isn't there, or the gold has been rehypothecated. Nobody gets a win out of that. So it has to be hushed up. Everybody wants to hush it up if that is the case. And softly, softly, catchy monkey. Now, I'm right in saying, am I not? It took some time, even if they've got all their gold back now, for Germany. Germany, have they got? Where do the Germans stand?
You're absolutely right, Godfrey. So then the French aren't alone. German economists and lawmakers were calling to repatriate theirs as well. So 37% of the Germans' gold is still held in America, which is about 1,200 tons. And a Bundesbank economist even publicly stated in their news channels that storing gold in the US is now too risky. And given the current geopolitical climate, they want to take theirs back as well, all of it. So there's no smoke without fire, Godfrey, and it's telling that the fourth largest gold holder in the world has bought all of its home, while the second largest, the Germans, are considering doing the same. It's unprecedented. So you can see basically going back to the audit of Fort Knox why they don't want it because it's all about the optics. If the American people found out that their gold had been used to quietly prop up the global paper market and the broader financial markets at large, I think the fallout it would be catastrophic. And I think the reason this all went totally off grid, totally quiet, is because Treasury Secretary Bessant quietly explained to Trump and Musk behind closed doors that they simply can't do that, and that's why the whole show was called off. But look, I think there's another reason as well why they won't audit it, besides that, which I think personally is a lot more revealing, Godfrey. And ultimately, that's to do with control. So the Federal Reserve, along with the commercial banks, of course, have a monopoly on money printing and money creation. And gold is the one thing that threatens that monopoly. And that's why the US government has spent decades downplaying gold's role. They don't want you thinking about it. Do you remember Ben Bernanke, Godfrey? Historically, he was the former chair of the Fed. He famously said that gold was just a barbarous relic. And look, they don't teach it in schools. They don't teach it for your A levels. They don't teach it in mainstream economics classes at university. Financial advisors laugh if you even mention it. They smirk at you. And most people under 50 have no idea that we used to be on a gold standard. I mean, look, it started.
I think he was quoting Maynard Keynes, wasn't he? When that wasn't an original of his,
No.
He'd recycled that from Maynard Keynes, which is still being taught in economic classes in all the universities. I know because I used to lecture at these universities on Austrian school economics, and it was absolutely fascinating. Your subscribers, my subscribers won't actually know probably that the Austrian School of Economics is not taught in universities, even in year 3. And a lot of undergraduates, including Cambridge, used to come up to me and say, "God, why do this lecture? I didn't know any of this, and I'm a third year." And whenever I mention it, and this is a classic, this is in all fairness was at Newcastle University, he said, I mentioned this to my tutor, and he said, "Oh well, if you want to study Austrian school economics, you should be reading philosophy." I said, this is what, and I drilled down. Now, here's an interesting point, talking about hypothecation and things not being there. When I drilled down occasionally, when I got something particularly stupid from an undergraduate who would email me and say, why has my tutor said this? I drilled down on one or two to find out if they were economists, and they weren't. They were running the economics faculty, but they weren't actually. I looked up and said, what did they read at university? Not that it matters particularly, because they're all wrong anyhow. But no, it's absolutely fascinating. So none of this is one whole long trail of bullshit.
Absolutely. And look, it started with FDR in 1933, when gold was confiscated from American citizens. And then, of course, in 1971, when Nixon closed the door, we came off the gold standard, and that was the final break. We went all in on fiat currency. And since then, we've had 3 generations of people growing up thinking that money is just paper or numbers on bank accounts. But behind the scenes, gold still matters. The central banks continue to accumulate it really quietly, really steadily. They just don't want you knowing about it. I mean, look, even the IMF, Godfrey, have got 2,800 tons of gold. So if gold is just a relic, why do the world's most powerful institutions keep hoarding it? Because they know that gold is the only real money, and it's just inconvenient for governments to admit that, really. So
I've said before, I've quoted it before, and excuse me doing it yet again. Of course, that wonderful quote by J.P. Morgan in 1912, "Only gold is money. Only gold is money." And it has been so for thousands of years. And this is so everything else is bogus. Everything else is fake. And of course, it's a bit like pass the parcel, isn't it? When the music stops, or musical chairs would be a better example. You go to sit down when the music stops and somebody's taken away the chair. And it just questions when that happens. And I've put my hands up before on this. I've been wrong on timing. I thought it would have happened by now. But it will happen, sure as God made little green apples.
They need to carry on this Ponzi for as long as possible to strip the middle class of all their wealth, enrich the elite at the very top for as long as they possibly can until it all comes collapsing down. We see a reset of the system. And I think, look, if they did open Fort Knox and did verify it under camera, it would be reminding everyone of this. And look, they've worked so hard to erase this. But the real money still exists and it is gold. It's not printed by the Federal Reserve. And why would they want to revive gold's significance with a high profile visit when pretending it doesn't matter allows them to keep the money printer running, keep us all distracted, all the while our wealth is being inflated away. Your cash in the bank is going to nothing. And what's remarkable as well, even back in 2024, Godfrey, the Treasury said that, oh no, we do carry out audits, we do it. And they released a report claiming to confirm all the gold in Fort Knox is still there. The problem is they never even went in and looked at it. So what they did is they just audited what they call the schedules, which are internal spreadsheets basically showing where the gold is supposed to be. They just said, look, the schedules are all presented fairly. They didn't bother going in, looking at the gold at all. It was a desk audit. They reviewed the paperwork. No one went in. And that's as good as you're going to get, basically. And what's really interesting, someone ran the numbers out there on this, but if you run the maths, a real audit of Fort Knox would take at least 18 months. Even with a 20-person team, as they'd have to inspect, it's over 360,000 gold bars, which are stored in these cramped, reinforced compartments. And these are 6 foot wide by 12 foot by 8 foot, I think, 8 foot tall. So you can't fit a forklift in there, Godfrey. You can't get any equipment in. You'd have to count, weigh, and verify the purity of each one manually. So it's going to take absolutely ages. Of course, each bar weighs 27.5 pounds as well. So they're extremely heavy. Of course, gold's one of the densest materials on the periodic table. And when I visited the vaults, look, I've tried to hold these in my hands. And you can try and smile for the camera while you're having a picture with one of them. But inside, you're dying to keep it in the air. They are so heavy. So, look, Godfrey, I don't think they're ever going to audit Fort Knox. I don't think they ever will. It's not just about checking that inventory. It's about maintaining that control. It's about fostering confidence, if you like, and ensuring the public doesn't question the status quo. That's why. It's that con in confidence. That's what it is. It would open up an absolute can of worms if they audited it.
Well, of course, that brings us directly to paper holding of gold, paper gold, as it were, and people now standing for delivery, which of course has not been done in the past. Perhaps you'd like to explain to my subscribers a little bit the basics of that. This paper gold, which is actually in some ways very simple, in other ways it's actually quite confusing. Tell us all about that.
Honestly, Godfrey, it's not confusing at all. It's a paper proxy that says it's gold, but it's not. So you can trade in and out of it, but when the time comes for delivery, there's 100 paper contracts to every ounce of gold. So only one person can take delivery of it, and the rest the paper's not worth the writing that's on it. You'd be cashed out for the cash equivalent and not actually receive the physical product. That's all it is. It's great for trading and ETFs and CFDs and things like that. I won't get into the technicals of them now, but you don't actually own any gold at all. It's really that simple.
But it's still, even now, and this is where one of my timing things has gone slightly wrong. It still affects certainly the London price of gold. So, for example, if people are buying gold from Gold Bullion Partners, or whomsoever it may be, generally speaking, it still has a very strong effect on the price mechanism, doesn't it?
Oh, hugely so. It keeps the price very suppressed because, of course, they can short it with these paper contracts to keep it down. All the while, they're accumulating and stacking the physical.
So, again, timing. And I asked this question of an expert friend of mine 20 years ago, it might have been now, certainly very near 20 years ago. Very clever man, clever guy in the gold market. And I said, how much longer can this go on? This is 20 years ago. I said, how much longer? He said, I think he was quite canny. He said, quite a long time, Godfrey, quite a long time. Now
Hmm.
we must surely be getting to the stage now when people are now standing for delivery and the number of contracts are very much fewer than they used to be. Have you?
Oh, they are, but has the COMEX ever broken the exchange? No, it never has in history because these guys can always change the rules. It's highly corrupt. They'd rather watch it all burn down than allow a default on the exchange. So they can either put up margin requirements, they can stop you taking delivery. There's all manner of different rule changes they can implement to stop this crashing. But you're right, the deliveries are going through the roof. There's hardly any physical inventory left. How long can it carry on for? Look, even a broken clock's right twice a day, Godfrey,
Mm, mm,
and everyone's saying it's going to break, it's going to break, it's going to break.
mm,
I don't know how long's a piece of string.
mm. So,
But all the while, the gold price is still going up, of course.
well, absolutely. But of course, I would argue nowhere near what it really should be yet. But
Mm.
there, I'm leaving all that aside because that's mere speculation. My subscribers aren't really interested in speculation. They like to get the facts and make their own decisions. But we are dealing with an interesting situation at the moment, and it brings us on. Leaving that side alone for a minute, it brings us onto coins, doesn't it? Is how my subscribers want to know. I often get asked, I'm sure you do, when people come on to me, although I don't deal, I'm not a dealer, everybody knows that. But people say, should I buy bars or should I buy coins? Perhaps you'd like to pick up on that.
Godfrey, every day. It's the same question every day. I get a lot of people calling me up saying, look, I want bullion, only bullion, and they presume that just means gold bars, but that's not the case at all. Gold coins are also bullion. So look, even many central banks, particularly in Europe, hold substantial amounts of gold coins accumulated during the gold standard era, so pre 1931, 1971. And that includes a lot of historical coinage as well, rather than just modern bars. From my experience, a very large proportion of those are sovereigns as well. A lot of the private banks and central banks you talk to when they're offloading or selling any reserves, they've got huge amounts of coins there as well. You look at coins, well, particularly sovereigns, they have one of the most liquid secondary markets in the world. So they've been amassed by a lot of institutions as well as individuals. So people commonly come in, they say, no, I only want bullion bars. I want bullion. They like the flashy look of them. The problem is bars are not tax free. They're not capital gains tax free because they're not considered legal tender. So why would you want to go paying 24% when you don't have to, when you can simply put it in coins? It works in the same way as your ISA does, Godfrey, just without any restrictions as to how much you could put in. If you want to put £1 million in there, double it in 3 years, no capital gains tax to pay on it at all. As long as you're a UK resident, you qualify for that exemption. And this is what so many people are still completely unaware of. I'd say every other call I have, Godfrey, I want bars, I want bars, I want bars.
Mm.
But no, you don't. Still bullion, but that caveat of British law means that you can't tax them for your UK resident. So it's highly efficient when it comes to tax planning. And of course, there's no counterparty risk either. You've got it in your hand. See it as a physical bank account. That's the way to look at your gold. Nothing speculative. No one's buying this to sell it in 3 months, chop back into fiat and make a quick profit on paper. Completely defeats the whole object of buying gold, which is just long-term capital appreciation. And if you can do that without paying any capital gains tax on it, then perfect.
And I like, reinforcing that point. We now live in a kleptocracy, and we have done for some time.
Mm.
This
Hmm.
lot, the differences with the government we have at the moment, they don't make any pretense to hide it. So basically, and I say this all the time, and I don't mind banging the drum again, if this government can see it, and when I say see it, they can check with the bank or whatever you have, or land registry. If they can see it, they will steal it. All right, everybody haul that in. If they can see it, they'll steal it. So what you want to do is if you go to your dealer, or you go to Nick. I do a lot of my personal work with Nick, but it doesn't matter. That's not the point. The point is that they come and they're in my greasy mitts, and if they're not in my greasy mitt, they are actually in an independent vault
Mm.
to which nobody has the key. Except me. Well, actually, I don't know. I got inheritance tax purposes. I got rid of it all. I don't know anything at all. It's all in the family's name somewhere along the line. But if you have it in specie and it's in coinage, and that's what you must do. And if I would say, depending on where you live, if you have a reasonable amount of the stuff, I would do that. I'd spread it around a few and pay the fee because if it's in a lockup somewhere in the right place with the right thing, you don't really want to be keeping it at home. And I always say this: I don't keep any at home, so don't come around and bash me on the bloody head. And ask me where the gold is, because it's not at home. It's all locked up nicely in various places. But that's a good thing. Now I know you ferret about, don't you, to get these coins, which are getting slightly more difficult to come by. And I know you ferret about and get coins from various sources. I don't know whether it's a trade secret or something. Can you tell us anything about that?
Auctions, institutional auctions, private banks, family offices, a lot in Europe, Godfrey, but you're absolutely right. They're getting a lot more difficult to find now, that's for sure. 5 years ago, they're a lot easier. Now, we've noticed a substantial dip in availability. So I'll get sometimes people calling up saying that I want 5 million quid's worth of these delivered within the next 48 hours. And it's more like, well, look, that's probably going to take 10 days to happen. Look, we could do that right now. But if you look back in January, for example, when we had a huge rally, you couldn't get it faster. You couldn't get it fast enough. But one thing to mention as well, though, is look, if you're looking at doing this within your pension, so it's not just all coins. If you're doing this on an individual basis, absolutely go for the coins for delivery or storage. But you can also put your pension into bullion bars as well. However, you cannot take delivery of that legally. That has to remain in storage. So anybody, I'm getting a lot of questions at the moment. I'm worried about my pension, and rightly so, but I think that's probably a topic for another day. How do I protect that? Well, that's also something we assist people with, but with those, you have to put it into bullion bars, not coins, and they also have to be stored.
I have, I have 100% of my pension fund, my pension pot, or one of my pension pots, is in gold bullion, in gold bars. But of course, your pension is not liable for capital gains tax. So don't fret if you want it in your pension. You will not be liable for capital gains tax. But as Nick says, it's when you take it out, all the other taxes will apply, income tax and so on, and your tax-free sum. And of course, that's all interesting too. But yeah, maybe for another day. But do bear that in mind, everybody.
It's yes, absolutely. And if anyone wants to talk about that, you can always get on the phone with me, one of my team as well, if you are interested in your pension.
Have we got anything else to talk about on these particular subjects? Do you think, Nick? Is there anything else we need to cover today?
Nope, I think that's everything, Godfrey.
We
Yeah.
covered it. Oh, one other thing, and it's not quite appetite to this, but there is just let me say this and just get your view on it as well, Nick. There is there's some funny stuff at the moment. Gold in a bit of the doldrums. It's a bit flatlining at the moment, and people say, a number of people have asked me. I mean, they will have asked you this, I'm quite sure, saying, just a minute, I thought if I was holding gold and there's war and mayhem all over the planet, shouldn't gold be shooting up? And the answer to that is this: at the moment, when you've got a lunatic like Trump with his war in the Middle East and the Israelis and all the rest of it, who seem to be bent on destruction for some reason of the entire globe, that does all trigger a liquidity crisis. And of course, a liquidity crisis, and if we have a stock market collapse, which is like people sell or have to unload whatever they can to pay school fees and their mortgages. And the first thing to do, which is the point of holding gold, is it always has a value. It always has a value, and that happens. That is historically, that is a temporary phenomenon. When things start to collapse, it's a temporary phenomenon. If everything goes down, what bounces quicker is real money, and real money is gold. But people have to pay the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker.
Exactly. It's a healthy correction, Godfrey. Whenever you see these jumps up, you will always get big dips like this. It's 2 steps forward, 1 back, 2 forward, 1 back. It's never just going to go in a straight line. But you're absolutely right. That was just a liquidity crisis, nothing more, nothing less. Hasn't changed the structural argument for gold. What's in one iota, it will carry on going up. But these are the times really that you want to be buying on these dips. However, sadly, most people want to buy as the price of it's going up and up and up. They never want to buy when it dips like this and it's lower. It's just human nature. Everyone does it. Doesn't matter who it is, whether it's the investment banker or the postman. It doesn't matter who it is. Everyone does it.
Oh, it's quite fascinating because I've been in some form of the financial world since 1967. When I went into the city, 1967, and I'm still working in the financial sector now, albeit precious metals, of course, and things of that nature. It's funny. The retail market always likes to wait until they always like to miss the first step up or the first 2 steps up. And I don't know. I don't know either, but they do.
It's crazy given what's going on in the world now. Every time we've had an oil crisis in history, it's always been the canary in the coal mine for a financial crash. It's in the 70s with Iran, 2007, we had the 2008 crash. Every single time in history there's been a crash. So people nickel and diming over the price. Oh, I think it might come down 2%. I think it might go up 1. Totally missing the point. You're picking up pennies on a train track. You keep doing that, you'll get wiped out. When you actually need it, when everything crashes, you won't have any.
Exactly right. Exactly right. It's always worth emphasizing that point, and I thank you for it, Nick. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's fine. I commit you on air now to coming on again.
Thank you, Godfrey.
In,
And
in a
again,
month
if anyone does want to call us about any of the topics, just there's a link in your comment section, isn't there, underneath?
on my website, you'll find a link direct to Nick. And I would say there's lots of very good people. There's good dealers there as well to look at, all of whom I know. I would say one thing: if you want to talk about your pension or something slightly more technical, Nick's team is very, very experienced indeed. As you could probably tell, he's been on a number of occasions on my channel. You are not just getting somebody who's going to flog it to you. You're going to get somebody who's capable of intelligently discussing the whole thing, and particularly with regard to pensions. And that's when you need contacts, because not every pension trustee will do it. So you've got to find out who will do it, etc., etc. So I'll leave it on that note. You'll get good advice from Nick and his team, and so it's well worth.
Godfrey, just to caveat that it's not financial advice. We can give people guidance. We are not financial advisors.
His team will say the same thing as I say the same thing when people email me. I do not give financial advice. I give generic advice, and that's what you'll get. How does it work? Not you should have this or shouldn't have this, or will it suit you or will it suit you? This is how the machine works, and that's all you'll get. But my goodness me, that's more than you can probably expect from an awful lot of people at the moment. So anyway, thanks, Nick. Thanks for coming on again, and I look forward to speaking to you again when I get back from wherever I'm going next. Istanbul, I think.
Pleasure, Godfrey. Always a pleasure. Take care.
Bye-bye. As most of you know, my work is very heavily independently research-based, and I get my information from all over the world. It would help if you press the subscribe button and the little bell next to it, because the more subscribers I have, the more likely it is that international independent research institutes will share their material with me. It's most helpful, and then of course I automatically share it with you. So, surprise, won't cost you anything. Thank you very much.